What if the moon was not what we have always believed? What if it was not a simple natural satellite, but the greatest mystery suspended above our heads? And what if, always in front of our eyes, the clue of something unknown, incredibly visible, and at the same time incomprehensible was hidden? We have been observing it for millennia, yet the moon continues to challenge our understanding. Why is it so big compared to the Earth? Why does it always show us the same face, as if it were an artificial satellite pointed at us? And why does its distance allow perfect eclipses, as if it had been placed with a precision that led some to wonder, is it only the result of an incredible cosmic coincidence? What do we really know about the moon, and what has never been told to us? In this investigation, we will go over data, anomalies, legends, and theories that make the moon a unique object, perhaps the biggest enigma in the sky. But before starting this journey to the limits of human knowledge, we invite you to support our work. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment with your opinion. For you, it is a simple gesture, but for us, it is essential to continue to carry out these investigations and grow the channel. The moon is our silent companion, always suspended in the night sky. We have been looking at it for millennia, yet its presence remains a mystery that challenges astronomical logic. The first fact that strikes is its size. The moon has a diameter of 3,474 kilometers, about 27% of that of the Earth, and a mass equal to 1.2% of the mass of the Earth. It is a unique relationship in the solar system. No other rocky planet has a satellite with similar proportions. The moons of Mars, Phobos, and Deimos are nothing more than captured asteroids. Ganymede and Titan, despite being among the largest moons, are tiny compared to the gas giants around which they orbit. This fact has led some scientists to see in the Earth-Moon system something different from a classic satellite system. Already in the 19th century, George Howard Darwin, son of the famous Charles Darwin, observed how the dimensions of the moon were such that the traditional definition of a natural satellite was inadequate. In 1977, astronomer Stephen Peale, in an article published in Annual Review of Astronomy and Astrophysics, wrote that the Earth-Moon system has characteristics that make it similar to a binary system, and a fact seems to confirm it. The barycenter of the Earth-Moon system, the point around which both bodies orbit, is not in the center of the Earth, but about 1,700 kilometers below its surface. The Earth, therefore, is not a fixed point. It oscillates, it dances with the moon around this common center. And then there is the question of distance. The moon is on average 384,000 kilometers from the Earth, and this distance means that its apparent diameter in the sky is practically identical to that of the sun. During a total eclipse, the moon covers the sun with such precision that the solar crown remains visible as a luminous ring, a spectacular, unique phenomenon made possible by a mathematical relationship. The sun is about 400 times larger than the moon, but it is also 400 times more distant. Of course, this alignment is a transitory event. The moon, in fact, moves away from the Earth at a speed of almost 4 centimeters per year, and total perfect eclipses have been possible only for about 500 million years, and will cease to be so in another 500 million years. But it is also true that all this happens in our time, a time in which we are the ones who can observe it. David Greenspoon, NASA astrobiologist, in his book Lonely Planets, defines this coincidence as one of the most improbable and extraordinary that we can observe in the life cycle of a planetary system. But it is not only the size or distance that raises questions, there is also its orbit. The moon follows an almost perfectly circular orbit with an eccentricity of just 0.055. This is a bizarre fact because natural moons tend to have more elliptical orbits, marked by gravitational interactions and by the chaotic residues of the formation of the solar system. The rotation of the moon is also synchronized. It always shows us the same face. This is what science calls synchronous rotation, the result of the tidal forces that have slowed its rotation down to block it. But the result is that our satellite appears like an immobile guardian, with a side always hidden from the human eye, at least until the era of space probes. There are really many coincidences. A moon too large, perfect in its orbit, too precise in its alignment with the eclipses, A satellite that seems to be there for a purpose. Is it really just a coincidence, or is the moon part of a drawing that still escapes us? But these are just the first anomalies because the mystery has just begun. If the dimensions and the distance of the moon are enough to raise questions, what science has observed of our satellite has added another level of mystery. Because the moon is not just big and close, it is also a celestial body that behaves in ways that, for decades, have fed controversial questions and hypotheses. The first surprising fact comes from the Apollo missions. When the astronauts dropped on the lunar surface modules and components of the missions, the seismometers installed on the moon recorded an unexpected phenomenon. The moon resounded. For minutes. In one case, after the controlled impact of module Apollo 12, the vibrations lasted over an hour. Maurice Ewing, a geophysicist who supervised the experiment, said it clearly in the report of the mission. We would never have expected a similar response. The moon sounded like a bell for over an hour. The official explanation speaks of the dry and rigid composition of the moon, without water, which transmits seismic waves in a much more efficient way than the Earth. Yet the entity and the duration of the phenomenon left the same scientists stunned by the mission. Such extreme behavior, although explainable in theory, remains unique in our direct experience of seismic exploration and has led some researchers to wonder whether the moon inside was a cave or at least had huge caverns. Craters are added to all this, and here popular narration has long been intertwined with science. The lunar surface is in fact marked by billions of years of impact. Observing the craters, it is noticeable that the largest are not as deep as one might expect, if the depth grew in proportion to the diameter. But this is not a mystery without explanation. The small craters, up to a few kilometers in diameter, retain a simple shape with a well-proportioned depth to the diameter. The large craters, on the other hand, collapse under their own weight, forming terraces, central peaks, and broken walls. The result is that the depth grows less rapidly than the diameter. Yet this explanation, although physically correct, did not convince everyone. Already in the 1970s, two scientists from the Soviet Academy, Vazin and Shcherbakov, proposed a radically different interpretation. In 1970, on the Sputnik magazine, they asked themselves, what if the proportion between diameter and depth of the craters was not a simple effect of gravitational collapse, but an indication of something extraordinary? What if the moon had an inner shell, an armored layer capable of stopping impacts beyond a certain limit? The result would be exactly what we are seeing now, large but surprisingly shallow craters. An extreme hypothesis, of course, but that was linked to a series of other oddities. The first of these oddities concerns the composition of the moon. If the hypothesis of an artificial structure seems crazy, the data from the lunar rocks reported on Earth make it, for some, disturbingly plausible. These rocks have in fact revealed unusual concentrations of extremely resistant metals, in particular titanium and chromium, in percentages far superior to those we would expect from a celestial body of this type. To understand the anomaly, let's think of titanium. On Earth, it is a strategic metal, fundamental for the aerospace industry. We use it to build military fighters, submarines, and spaceships, precisely for its incredible resistance to heat and corrosion, combined with a surprising lightness. Now imagine the astonishment of scientists when analyses like those documented by Korotev in the Journal of Geophysical Research showed that certain areas of the moon contain 10 times more titanium than the Earth's rocks that are richer in this element. For Vasin and Shcherbakov, this was no coincidence. It was the smoking gun. In their theory, a protective shell built by an advanced civilization would require exactly such a material. The abundance of titanium on the surface would be nothing more than the residue of this internal armor, excavated and scattered on the surface by billions of years of meteorological impacts. But these unusual metals are not the only strangeness concerning the outer shell of the moon. Its very structure, the crust, hides a geographical paradox. It is thicker on the hidden side, what we never see, a fact that challenges logic. We would expect that the Earth's gravity and time would have thinned the crust on the closer side. Instead, the opposite happens. So we have an anomalous composition and an asymmetrical structure. But the lunar surface hides another type of secret, not engraved in matter, but in a ghostly energy, magnetism. The moon is considered a magnetically dead body, devoid of a global field like the Earth's. However, its surface tells another story. There are magnetic scars, areas of strong, localized magnetism, inexplicable fossil remains of an ancient magnetic field. The most disturbing thing is that these anomalies are often associated with enigmatic formations. The lunar vortexes, or lunar swirls, appear as light, insinuous drawings on the dark dust, almost as if they had been painted. The theory is that these local magnetic shields have protected for billions of years that portion of soil from the solar wind. But what has generated these specific magnetic shields? And why do they create these almost artistic shapes? Are they the ghost of an ancient active nucleus, or traces of still unknown events? From the traces left on its surface to the secrets of its internal structure, the moon reveals a body full of contradictions. But if we widen our gaze and observe not the object, but its cosmic dance, perhaps the most disconcerting anomaly of all emerges: its orbital behavior. The moon, as we mentioned earlier, follows an almost perfectly circular orbit. Some may object that other moons in the solar system have similar orbits, like Jupiter's. But there is a huge difference. Jupiter's moons formed in a stable environment, while according to the dominant theory, the moon was born from the chaos of a catastrophic impact. The fact that such a violent event has produced such a stable orbit is one of the aspects that models struggle to replicate. It is as if an almost perfect order. But it is not only the orbit that is surprising, it is the combination of this orbit with another behavior: synchronous rotation. The moon always shows us the same face. Science explains it as the natural result of tidal forces. Yet the final result is disturbing. Let's think about it. What do we do when we design our artificial satellites for telecommunications, terrestrial observation, or espionage? We put them on a stable and circular orbit to maintain a constant distance, and we orient them so that their instruments and their antennas always point towards the Earth. The moon does exactly the same thing, a circular orbit in a face permanently pointed at us. A behavior that in a natural context has inevitably led some to wonder, is it just a coincidence, or are we observing the characteristics of a gigantic observation instrument? The moon is so present in our sky that it seems eternal. Yet there are ancient stories that tell us about an era when the moon was not there. An era when the night sky was different, darker, deeper. An era that perhaps human memory, through myths, has not completely forgotten. These stories emerge from peoples and cultures far apart from each other, both in space and in time. Philosophers and chroniclers like Aristotle and Apollonius Rhodius pass on the memory of people who lived before the moon. Aristotle speaks of the Pelasgians as of an ancient people who lived in the region of Arcadia before the moon was in the sky. Plutarch and Lucius Aeneas mention remote times when the night sky did not know the brightness of our satellite. In addition to the Mediterranean, in pre-Columbian America, oral traditions of some Andean populations like the Quechua and the Aymara tell of times when the night was without the light of the moon, an era that preceded the arrival of Inti, the sun, and Quilla, the moon. Even in Mesopotamia, the cradle of ancient astronomy, there are texts and myths that describe the settlement as incomplete in a remote past. The Sumerians and the Akkadians, people very attentive to celestial motifs, speak of a time when the sky was different, before the final ordering of the celestial spheres by the gods. They are legends, of course. But why would such different peoples have to tell the same story? Is it possible that these stories are the deformed and mythical memory of a real event? Or perhaps the symbol of an epical change that marked the history of the first civilizations? Science, of course, does not claim that the moon appeared only in historical times. Astronomical and geological models date the formation of the moon to about 4.5 billion years ago. But it remains the fact that these traditions exist and that they have fed, for centuries, hypotheses and theories that see in the moon an object arrived later, perhaps brought, perhaps placed. In 1909, the British scholar George Frederick Chambers collected several of these traditions and observed how the reason for the time without the moon was surprisingly recurrent in the mythologies of the world. And even more surprising is that these legends do not seem explainable with well-known astronomical observations, such as eclipses or temporal absences of the moon in the sky. The mystery, therefore, is infested because these stories, echoes of a very distant past, pose a different question. Why did such distant cultures feel the need to imagine a sky without its brightest guardian? What deep collective memory, real or symbolic, were they trying to preserve? Faced with such a dense mystery, science did not remain silent. It built an imposing narrative to explain the birth of our celestial companion, the theory of the giant impact. The scenario it describes is apocalyptic. About 4.5 billion years ago, a planet the size of Mars called Theia collides with a still young Earth. The impact is catastrophic. A huge cloud of incandescent debris is thrown into space, and over thousands of years it aggregates to form the moon. This theory on paper is elegant. It would explain why the moon has such a small iron nucleus and why it is so much larger than Earth. But when we put this story to the test, when we compare it with the anomalies we have seen, the verdict is uncertain and full of buts. The first but is perhaps the most inexplicable and concerns its very identity. Remember the high concentrations of titanium, so different from those of Earth? Paradoxically, when scientists analyze not the quantity, but the digital imprint of those elements, their isotopic signature, they discovered that it is identical to that of Earth. If the moon were made up of Theia, it should have a different chemical DNA. Instead, it does not. As explained in a study on natural geoscience, it is as if two different people had identical digital imprints, a paradox that forces the models to hypothesize a perfect mixing or extremely improbable coincidences. And what about its orbit, so strangely circular and stable? The official theory explains it as the result of billions of years of gravitational braking. Yet, as astronomers of the caliber of Thuma and Wisdom observe, creating such a perfect order from the chaos of a catastrophic impact requires very specific initial conditions, a series of fortunate coincidences that sound almost like a force. We have traveled between scientific data, ancient legends, and hypotheses at the limit of the conceivable. We have observed the moon with the eyes of science and with those of doubt. And now at the end of this journey, the mystery not only remains, but becomes deeper, more personal. It is no longer a single anomaly, but an out-of-place data. It is a picture of togetherness, a cascade of statistical improbabilities, an architecture of such precise coincidences as to challenge our very conception of chance. The theory of the giant impact offers us a story of origin, but it does not explain why this scheme, this almost disturbing perfection, and this is where the most radical question emerges. And if the key to reading was not to analyze each anomaly individually, but to observe the final result, what do we see? We see an object that behaves not as a chaotic residue of a collision, but as a tool of high precision. Its stable and circular orbit, combined with its rotation permanently blocked towards us, is no longer just an astronomical strangeness. It becomes the prototype of what we ourselves build when we want to observe, monitor, perhaps even influence a planet. And here the mystery becomes dizzying, because this apparently perfect machine is not just there, inert. It seems to perform an active, almost providential role. Its dance with the sun gives us eclipses of mathematical beauty. Its presence stabilizes the Earth's axis, giving us a predictable climate, a world in which complex life could flourish. The next time you look up at the sky, do not limit yourself to seeing a light at night. Ask yourself what you are really looking at, a natural satellite, or the greatest silent secret in human history, suspended forever above our heads. If you like this investigation, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, put a like and write your opinion in the comments, because it is essential to support our work and to help us grow and spread the channel. See you next time. Hi, I'm John. Our journey into mystery continues. If you want to uncover more hidden truths and answers to the greatest enigmas, leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Together, we'll explore the unknown. And who knows what secrets we'll find.